When 21-year-old college student Amy Blount went missing, her dedicated family and friends did all they could to try to find her. However, as the missing persons investigation turned to murder, detectives realized they might already have spoken to someone who knew all about what happened to Amy, because he was actually involved in her death. It was November 6, 1990, the group of college students went to St. George's Tavern, a local hotspot near Flagler College in St. Augustine, Florida. They were having a good time when Kelly Brockman, Blount's roommate, decided to leave early because she wasn't feeling well. When she left, Blount was spending time with her crush, Sean Nolan. It was only the next morning. Blount had still not returned home and failed to show up at her morning classes. Worried, Kelly and her friends initially assumed she was still with Nolan, but when they asked him about Blount, they were shocked by what they heard about Blount. Nolan said he and Amy had walked to the shoreline close to the bar at around 2 a.m., but that they had a disagreement as they waited for the taxi they had ordered to come. When the car arrived, Nolan got in it, but Amy walked away, and she hadn't been seen since. The young woman's disappearance was reported to police. Since there was not yet any evidence, police could not officially declare Blount a missing person. The following day, Blount's loved ones began searching for her around town, putting up missing persons flyers and forming search parties to scour the woods, but no one found anything. When days passed and Blount still has not materialized, authorities finally launched an official investigation into her disappearance, and the first thing they did was bring in Nolan, Blount's crush, for questioning. Nolan was an obvious person of interest, as he had not only apparently been the last person to see Amy alive, but had admitted to having a disagreement with her before she vanished. What's more, when he was interviewed by police, Nolan gave a different story than the one he'd given Blount's roommates. He said, at the end of the night, when he was ready to go home, he'd used a nearby payphone to call a taxi to take Blount home, but when he turned around after making the call, she was gone. Although he waited for a while, he said she never reappeared, so when the cab arrived, he went home. Then the police reached out to the cab driver to verify Nolan's alibi. He revealed that when he had arrived at the road near the coastline, the young man had been fast asleep on a public bench. After Blount had been missing for nearly 10 days, with no activity on her bank accounts, authorities offered a $10,000 reward for information about Blount's disappearance, leading to an influx of tips. One such call came from a man named Timothy Gatchell, who told police as soon as he saw Blount's face on the missing person poster, he recognized her as a young woman he'd seen in the downtown area on the same night that Blount had disappeared. He said that she was standing by an old car, talking to the people inside the car, and then she climbed in and the car drove off. It was on January 1, 1991, a man had been walking his dog in a secluded area on the outskirts of St. Augustine. The dog ran to a pile of logs and began to sniff interestedly. When the man walked over to see what his pet had found, he was horrified to see what looked like human bones poking out from the pile. Police hurried to the scene and found a woman's body wrapped in a floral bedsheet and buried in a shallow grave. She was wearing the same green top, shorts and heels Amy had been wearing that night, and holes in the clothing suggested the victim had been stabbed multiple times in the chest. Dental records confirmed everyone's worst fears: the body in the grave was Amy Blount. Her remains were returned to her family and she was finally given a proper burial 2 months after she had originally disappeared. When investigators took a closer look at the burial site, they suspected the killer may be someone local. The area was too secluded to come across randomly, so the chances were Amy's killer already knew it well. They questioned the owner to whom the land belonged and discovered that he also owned 2 mobile homes on the same plot, which he regularly rented out. And police discovered that one of the tenants was Timothy Gatchell, the helpful witness who had been so eager to assist Amy's family. It suddenly looked as though Gatchell might have offered a false tip. Investigators rushed to search Gatchell's home, where they found a sheet that matched the kind that Blount was found wrapped in, as well as a long hair that was the color of Blount's, caught in a screw on a weightlifting bench. Crime scene technicians also discovered there were traces of blood throughout the home. Police also found a scrap of paper with the name Toby written on it and a phone number, leading them to a man who could help them finally fill in the missing pieces of the puzzle. When contacted by police, Toby agreed to come in for questioning. He told investigators he was with Gatchel on the night of Blount's disappearance and that the two of them had been out bar hopping when they spotted Blount walking alone. Gatchel told Toby to stop the car so he could talk to her, and Toby watched as Gatchel went to talk to Blount and led her back to the car. She got inside willingly, Toby said, and he drove them all to Gatchel's house. Once there, Gatchel began coming on to Blount, but Blount wasn't interested. At that point, Toby said, he went to the bathroom and left the home without seeing either of them again. Toby was cleared of having any involvement in the murder, and investigators hurried to find and arrest Gatchel. At last, Gatchel admitted the truth about what had happened. He claimed he and Blount had gotten into a fight, and at some point a knife had got involved, but he wasn't sure because he may have blacked out. He said the next thing he knew was that Blount was lying on the floor, with blood coming out of her mouth, and the knife was in his hand. He claimed he then went outside, got a shovel, and dug a hole before going back inside, wrapping Blount up in a sheet, and carrying her outside, where he buried her body and said a prayer for her. Gatchel was arrested for first-degree murder and stood trial in July 1991. In order to avoid the death penalty, he pled guilty and is currently serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. That brings us to the end of today's video. What do you think of this case? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section.